What would you do if an everyday maintenance dive suddenly turned into a nightmare, trapping you inside a massive underwater pipeline with no way out? This is the case with the Paria diving disaster of 2013. It wasn't just an accident, as it exposed the terrifying dangers hidden beneath the surface of the oil and gas industry. So, how did this tragic event unfold, and what critical mistakes led to the loss of 4 lives? Wait, did I just say 4? Well, yes, and so welcome the Tragedy Hub, and without further ado, let's uncover the full story together. Setting the scene. In the warm waters of the Caribbean, the Gulf of Paria sits quietly between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela. This area is more than just a stretch of sea. It's a critical zone for oil and gas, where massive tankers and platforms constantly extract resources that power industries far beyond the shores of Trinidad and Tobago. The Paria Fuel Trading Company operates here, managing vital underwater pipelines that transport oil and gas from offshore rigs to the mainland. In 2013, one of these pipelines needed maintenance. It seemed like a routine job, the kind done many times before. A team of 5 commercial divers was assigned to inspect and repair the 30-inch pipeline located at berth number 6. These were experienced professionals, familiar with the challenges of underwater work. But the Gulf of Paria has its secrets. While the divers were preparing for their descent, they had no idea what lay ahead. This was a dive like any other until the forces of nature and human error collided. A sudden change in water pressure, known as a Delta P event, would soon make this dive anything but routine, pulling them into a deadly current that no one could escape. So, what exactly happened in those crucial moments underwater, and why was this operation set up in such a hazardous way? The dive begins. The day was June 3, 2013. 5 divers prepared to carry out their assignment on a 30-inch pipeline submerged in the waters off Trinidad's coast. They were tasked with what seemed like standard maintenance, an underwater inspection and welding job to ensure the pipeline's integrity. Each diver had his role, and they had all the equipment they needed, from oxygen tanks to diving suits, ready to tackle the deep. Their setup was kind of unique that day, as they were using a specialized structure designed to create a dry, safe working area right on the seabed. This was an 8-foot cube, a kind of underwater chamber filled with air to push the water out, allowing the divers to move around freely and handle their tools without the restrictions of their heavy gear. This setup was like a mini workshop, carefully placed over the pipeline section where the maintenance was needed. For these experienced divers, this method was familiar and routine, a way to do their job efficiently in an otherwise challenging environment. So as they descended into the depths, the divers began to work in sync, each movement careful and calculated. The waters around them were calm, visibility was decent, and the job seemed easy. But within moments, everything changed. They had a problem. 2 weeks before the dive, an inflatable plug had been installed inside the pipeline to block off the section where the divers would be working. This plug was used to prevent any remaining oil from leaking out during maintenance. This is standard practice in the industry. However, these plugs can create a dangerous pressure difference between 2 sections of a pipeline. In this case, the air pressure built up on one side of the plug while the pressure on the other side remained low. As the divers began loosening the valve to release the plug, the built-up pressure suddenly released, turning the inside of the pipe into a powerful vacuum. Within seconds, everything nearby, water, tools, and the divers, was pulled into the pipeline with incredible force. This event wasn't something the divers were prepared for. There was no warning about the pressure difference or the risks it posed. The simple act of releasing that plug set off a chain reaction, instantly creating a dangerous situation that led to the disaster. There was now a differential pressure event, popularly known as Delta P event, the kind that experts fear most in underwater operations. Now, you might be a little bit confused, but let me break it down. Well, a Delta P event happens when water pressure builds up unevenly in a pipeline, creating a sudden and violent vacuum effect. This force can pull anything into the pipeline with unimaginable speed. You got it? So, in just seconds, the divers were hurled through the pipeline at terrifying speed for 90 long seconds, until they finally landed in a small pocket of air where they could catch their breath. Despite their injuries and the pitch-black surroundings, the group tried to stay calm. They formed a human chain, moving slowly through the thick, slippery oil coating the pipe walls, desperately trying to find a way out. As they pushed forward, they came across 2 oxygen tanks, a brief glimmer of hope. Christopher, one of the divers, knew they had to ration the air carefully, so he told the others to take small breaths. But as they continued, the water level inside the pipe started rising, forcing them into an impossible choice: stick together and risk running out of air, or send someone ahead to find a way out. So, Christopher took the lead. He swam into a submerged section, pushing his body to its limits, searching for another pocket of air. When he finally came across another oxygen tank, he realized the regulator was missing its mouthpiece. With no time to waste, he found a way to take a breath and kept moving, determined to reach the surface. When he finally escaped the pipe, Christopher immediately alerted the rescue teams, sharing everything he knew about the trapped divers and their location. But there was doubt among the official and rescuers. They suspected the pipeline was filled with oil and believed the oxygen supply wouldn't last more than an hour, casting uncertainty over any immediate rescue efforts. The rescue efforts. As news of the accident broke, a race against time began. The Coast Guard, local fire services, and even other commercial diving teams were quickly called to the scene. The goal was clear: find and rescue the divers who were trapped inside the pipeline. Yet, what unfolded next was a scene of chaos and confusion. Rescue teams faced immediate challenges. The location of the pipeline, its depth, and the strong underwater currents made every move difficult. The divers who arrived to help had to deal with murky water, which made it hard to see even a few feet ahead. Essential tools like high-powered underwater cameras and specialized cutting equipment were either unavailable or inadequate for the task at hand. Every second lost felt like an eternity, but progress was slow and uncertain. As hours turned into days, frustration began to mount. There was confusion over who was in charge of the rescue, with different agencies and teams struggling to coordinate their efforts. Family members and the public grew increasingly desperate for answers. The question loomed large: why did it take so long to begin a proper rescue effort? Sooner, the rescue team sprang into action, sending divers down to the pipeline, knocking in desperate hope. And they got a response: knocks from inside, a clear sign that some of the men were still alive. Yet despite this glimmer of hope, the rescue efforts fell apart. The trapped divers endured hours of agony, battling toxic oil fumes, rising water, and dwindling air. Days passed, and the help they so desperately needed never came. In the end, it was too late. The bodies of the 4 men were eventually recovered, Christopher Boudram being the only survivor. Interestingly, some reports suggested that all 4 divers might have survived until Saturday, clinging to life in those dark, oil-filled confines. Others speculated that one of them could have held on until Monday, enduring even longer in unimaginable conditions. This ambiguity raised questions. Did the rescue teams have more time than they thought? Could more decisive action have made a difference? This now shifted everything to finding out how such a disaster could have happened in the first place. What were the failures in planning and response? And who would be held accountable for the loss of these lives? As the story continued to unfold, it became clear that this was not just about an accident in the water. It was about the systems and decisions that led to such a tragic outcome. The investigation. Investigators quickly moved in, looking to understand how a routine maintenance dive could turn into such a catastrophe. At the center of their inquiry were 2 key questions. Was this tragedy preventable? And who was responsible for what went wrong? As the investigation unfolded, a series of troubling findings came to light. The first red flag was the lack of a proper safety plan. The dive had been conducted without adequate measures to protect against a known danger, like the Delta P phenomenon. The team had not fully assessed the risks, and critical safety procedures were either missing or not followed. The divers entered the pipeline with little knowledge of the deadly forces at play, and there was no comprehensive emergency response plan in place. The regulators and authorities were also under scrutiny. How could they have allowed such an operation to proceed without ensuring all the safety protocols were in place? Were the oversight and inspections thorough enough? The commission set up to investigate the disaster pointed to lapses at multiple levels, from the diving company, LMCS Limited, to the Paria Fuel Trading Company, and even the regulatory bodies that were supposed to ensure safe practices. Reports also revealed that the equipment available for rescue was outdated and insufficient for such a complex operation. There was also a lack of high-tech tools and proper gear for an underwater rescue. Furthermore, the coordination between different agencies was messy, with confusion over who was leading the efforts, which caused precious time to be lost. And so, families of the divers demanded accountability. The fallout. The affected families wanted to know why their loved ones had been sent into such a risky situation without adequate protection or planning. So, with time, they filed lawsuits against the Paria Fuel Trading Company and LMCS Limited, accusing them of negligence and failure to provide a safe working environment. A commission of inquiry was then established, bringing together local and international experts to analyze every detail of the incident. The commission's hearings were filled with testimonies from witnesses, experts, and officials, each adding pieces to the puzzle of what went wrong that day. The inquiry highlighted a series of failures, from inadequate safety protocols to poor emergency response planning. It became clear that the disaster was not just the result of a single mistake, but a combination of many oversights and gaps in the system. The political landscape also felt the impact. The disaster raised questions about the effectiveness of government regulations and oversight in the oil and gas sector, a cornerstone of Trinidad and Tobago's economy. Calls for stricter safety laws and better enforcement grew louder, and government officials faced pressure to address the apparent lack of oversight and accountability. So, after all the investigations, legal battles, and demands for change, one question still lingers. Will this tragedy finally push the industry to prioritize safety over profit? Or is it just a matter of time before history repeats itself in another corner of the world? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell.